Imagine that you saw things differently than the way you do now. That you were hardwired, so your sensory experience itself was unlike anything you've ever felt. Maybe anyone you've ever known. Maybe it's that you see the world in black and white, or that the aroma of someone's perfume a couple of rows away from you is so overwhelming that you have a hard time concentrating on my voice. Well, over the past year, I've had a chance to spend some time with some individuals whose experience of reality is unlike anything I've ever seen, and likely any you have either. And yet, the priorities in the way they live their life are largely the same. They spend their time raising their family, they visit friends, they mourn the death of those they've lost, and they take their young ones great distances to meet their long and far-off family. And I guess that's really not so surprising. It's just that the individuals I've spent the year with are elephants. I'm not a scientist, I'm a filmmaker. It's just that most of the stories I tell are those that have been revealed or inspired by science. And so what I tend to do is to spend about a year at a time learning about different topics. I read all the literature, I call up experts around the world, and I often get to travel to very distant places to find those stories, to film them, and to bring them back. But this was the only time I've ever called from all those years in the field to say back home that I'm changed. I'm a different guy today than I was this morning. What happened was that I went to Botswana to help tell the story about a little baby elephant that some friends of mine had the sheer talent and tenacity enough to film the very birth of. Her name is Naledi, and it means star in Setswana. Now, tragically, what brought me into the story was the fact that just 6 weeks after she was born, her mother died because of some complications, most likely to do with the birth. And suddenly, this little baby's life was incredibly at risk. Well, it was what happened next between her and her herd, and between that herd and the men who look after them, that I saw things I could never have imagined, that changed the way I saw these creatures, and that pointed out to me most of all that every single one of them is absolutely an individual. The big one here with Naledi is Kathy. Now, she's the 50-year-old matriarch of this herd of misfits. She herself spent more than 2 decades in a zoo here in North America before she was finally able to get back to Africa, where she'd been taken from as a 2-year-old. Now, the thing is, Kathy did not get along with Naledi's mother. Not at all. In fact, she disliked her so intensely, she attacked her so violently to actually puncture her ear and snap one of her giant tusks in 2. But here's the thing. On the very night Naledi's mother died, Kathy adopted her orphaned daughter. And what's more, produced milk for her to drink, even though she had never had a baby of her own. Sadly, her generosity wasn't enough. Either the milk she was producing wasn't strong enough or rich enough, or she wasn't making enough of it, and the lady was hungry. And so she would keep coming back again and again to nurse again and again. But that wasn't enough either, because Kathy was annoyed and frustrated and in pain from this entreaties of this little thing, and would push her away. And before long, days went to weeks, and weeks went to weeks, and the lady began to starve. Now, the men who look after the herd tried relentlessly to supplement what she was getting from Kathy with formula from a bottle, a big 2-liter Coke bottle. But she would not accept it from them because she was bonded emotionally to her surrogate mother and not to them. And so with her literally on the verge of death, they had no choice but to make a desperate attempt to separate her from the little bit of milk she was getting from Kathy, bring her apart from the herd for a long time, and spend no time with any other elephants so that she would hopefully bond with them, accept the bottle, drink the milk, and save her life. I'm happy to say that's exactly what happened. But they had to keep her apart for 4 months to ensure that she was wedded to the bottle and wouldn't go back to trying to drink from Kathy. And so when it came time to bring her back to the herd, they had no idea if they would recognize her, or if they did, if she would be accepted or rejected by the family. They decide to try the safest thing, which is to introduce her first to her sister, Lorato, who herself was just 5 years old.
Easy, easy.
Now, Lorato's reaction is to immediately try to smell her. And then this movement she starts to make with her trunk is one of over 200 different gestures that have been cataloged to be used in very specific instances. This curling. It means, I don't know what to do.
Come, Lorato. It's your little sister.
Lorato is very confused at the moment. What's going through her head is, this is not right. Potentially saying, hang on, this is not right. I know the smell, but she's been gone. Where has she been gone? She hasn't seen her for 4.5 months.
Uncertain what to do, and inherently a social creature whose life revolves around family, she returns to the herd to get reinforcements to figure this out. And the men hold Kathy back because they don't know what she's going to do. So the first to come in is the youngest, little Pasika, herself an orphan who was adopted by Naledi's mother and suckled by her, raised by her before she died.
Let it happen, let it happen. Let it happen, let it happen.
And absolutely fearlessly, she starts to separate her sister from the men, to reclaim her. And the herd joins in, and they start circling around her and forming a protective circle the very way they would in the wild to protect the babies and the infants from predators. Because really, it's only until they're about 4 or 5 that they're vulnerable to anything. After that, it's just us. Immediately upon securing her, they touch, because the tactile sense is important to them as any other. And they reaffirm these bonds. Finally, it stabilizes enough that the men are able to bring Kathy in. But before she's able to get where the little ones are, the only other adult in the herd rushes out to greet her, to bring the news. What we see here is nothing short of a family celebration. They hug each other. These temporal glands that express emotion are excreting nothing short of tears of joy. And they lock their trunks in solidarity. Their erstwhile family is together again. Now, this rich interior life that we can see evinced in just this one episode is just the tip of the iceberg about what we're learning about these creatures. Our beautiful brain has something like 90 billion neurons. That of an elephant, 400 billion. And while our forebrain, which is where we understand our mind to reside, is far more complex and richer than theirs, their cerebellum is the largest of any creature on the planet. Now, the cerebellum we know from ourselves and those animals that have been well studied is primarily used for fine motor control, our fingers, the larynx in our throat, their trunk. But it's also the place where we synthesize sensory information. And the elephant's sensory world is nothing short of absolutely extraordinary. They have what is probably the most powerful sense of smell on the planet. And it's not just because they have a big nose. The olfactory bulb in our brains is the size of a Q-tip. The one in your dog that needs to process all that smell that we know that they're getting is about as big as your thumb. Well, the olfactory bulb in an elephant is as big as the palm of your hand. What is it like to experience smell as a primary that richly? They also can hear sounds that we can't. Just the way bats and dogs hear higher frequencies, they hear below and use this infrasound to communicate with each other across vast distances. They are so sensitive, in fact, that they can pick up the vibrations of a distant thunderstorm 150 kilometers away by picking it up with sensors in their feet. They are so radically different. And yet, they are also able to pass tests that we set up based on our parameters. They're one of the few animals other than humans to ever pass the so-called mirror test, to recognize that the reflection in the mirror is not some other animal, but is in fact a version of themselves. So much so that when a mark is put on their head, they can wipe it off with their trunk. They are so other, and yet so much the same. And it's not just elephants. The magpies can pass the mirror test. Crows can recognize individual human faces and remember which one was a greater threat more than a year later. An African gray parrot was taught to use over 100 different English language words in English, and when it was taught the color spectrum, asked, "What color am I?" It took 4 attempts before it learned the word gray. Even the octopus, which doesn't have a bone in its body, has been shown to spontaneously create tools, carrying empty coconut shells along with it across open expanses so it could use them to hide inside. The evidence just keeps pouring in. So much so, in fact, that scientists gathered in Cambridge, including Stephen Hawking, to declare that human beings are not unique in possessing the physiological substrate that generate consciousness. In fact, they said all mammals do, and all birds do, and even other animals, including the octopus. And 2/3 of the octopus's brain, its neurons, are in its arms. Now, we have to be careful here. The consciousness is not the same as self-awareness. And what I don't want to suggest is that we anthropomorphize these creatures, to say that they are somehow some version of us, some Disneyfied version of us, stuck inside another body, that they think like us, that they feel like us, that they are like us. No. They are different. They are unique. They are dissonant with how we are, and that is the point. It's just that we tend to miss out on something if we evaluate them by our criteria instead of by their own. So instead of trying to anthropomorphize them, maybe what we need to do is animalize ourselves. Why not? To recognize that we are one species in this continuum of living beings, one branch of a vast evolutionary tree that includes everything alive on the planet, and every branch of which has its own unique, particular, and absolutely amazing fruit. But just like we did before Copernicus and Galileo with the stars, we've put ourselves at the center of it all. We've put ourselves at the top of the pyramid. We've said we're the exception. We've even gone so far as to create our own place within the Linnaean system of Homo africarensis, robustus, habilis, sapiens. This is a cultural and not a biological distinction. Genetically, we are pan. We belong in the same exact group as the chimp and the bonobo and the gorilla and the orangutan. And if you were going to go to the chimp and find out which of the two was the closer genetic relative, it would not be the gorilla, it would be us. And so it's no surprise that as people around the world are beginning to recognize the personhood of non-human animals, the first that are getting the most attention, and in fact, the first legal status, are apes, the ones most like us. This solipsism is hard to shake. But what if we recognize that each and every one of us is just another animal? Each with our own particular suite of perceptions and wiring, our own particular needs and ways of seeing and histories and fears and wants. If we could do that, we could have a richer way to live with every living being, whether those close here at home or in that greater world beyond. Thank you very much.